How it happened in hip hop. Did Snoop Dogg betray Tupac to survive the West Coast versus East Coast beef and become a global icon? One of the founding fathers of the 90s West Coast G-Funk movement, Snoop Dogg has used his unique flow to build a cannabis lifestyle brand and globally loved persona since 1992. After raking in nearly $9 million in appearances and sponsorships from the 2024 Paris Olympics, one begins to wonder how a man also known as Snoop Lion and Snoop Doggy Dogg has garnered so much success after being a part of the deadliest rap beef in American history. The price of success means sometimes you gotta separate to elevate, and Snoop was a prime example of betraying his friend and label's code to transform his career from Long Beach thug to double platinum icon. For Hype Plus News, I'm Millie Rock, and this is how it happened in hip hop. It's 1991, and the West Coast is making waves in the music scene. Led by groups like NWA, The Far Side, and Cypress Hill, the nation can't get enough of the West Coast sound. As more artists entered the chat and more money started flowing to that side of the country, so did the drama. After 4 years of dominating the airwaves, NWA has broken up in a very messy way. Emboldened by his fallout with Eazy-E and NWA, producer and rapper Dr. Dre would team up with businessman Marion Suge Knight to create Death Row Records and introduce the world to the new leaders of the West Coast wave. When it rains, it pours, and the tension between East Coast and West Coast was pouring into radio stations and labels around the country. Heated by the rejection from major labels of the East Coast sound in favor of the West Coast, Bronx rapper Tim Dog voiced his anger on the infamous song Compton and sent direct shots at the previous members of NWA in the 1991 music video containing violent gestures towards Eazy-E, Dr. Dre, and DJ Quick lookalikes. Dr. Dre wasn't gonna let this diss track slide though. On behalf of the West Coast, Dr. Dre released his first full-length album called The Chronic, ushering in the era of Death Row Records and introducing the world officially to Snoop Dogg. Hailing from Long Beach, California, Calvin Cortazar Brodus Jr., aka Snoop Dogg, was discovered by Dr. Dre in 1992 when he was assisting the former NWA star on the soundtrack for the movie Deep Cover. Hopping off the movie title track Deep Cover, he proved that he could hang with the big dogs and delivered a flow that complemented Dre's nuanced gangsta funk style. Snoop Dogg would be called again to put on for the label and was featured on the second song of The Chronic, taking a bite at Tim Dogg's claims and letting him know who was the top dog of the rap game and solidifying his place at Death Row. Proving his skill and loyalty, Snoop would be next up for his first release under the label. His freshman album, Doggy Style, featured hits like Gin and Juice with Dr. Dre and Who Am I, What's My Name, reaching the #1 spot on Billboard. As Snoop's career took off, he would be featured in multiple movies and be seen at some of Hollywood's biggest events. While attending a rap party for the movie Poetic Justice, he would meet Tupac Shakur, an actor and conscious rapper at the time, growing in popularity. And guys, this is the first time he is past his very first blunt, sparking their intense friendship. As their friendship grew, Snoop would frequently collaborate with Shakur and encourage his involvement with Death Row Records. The two would develop a close bond, collaborating together on records, liquor commercials, and more, representing the West Coast. Despite the success and good times, the streets still had a chokehold on Snoop. Facing an accomplice to murder charge in connection to a drive-by shooting earlier in the year, Snoop would turn himself in on September 2nd, 1993, after presenting Best R&B Music Video at the MTV Music Awards. Death Row Records was developing a neat trick that they would remix a couple times to keep their superstars in the light. I mean, you can't have the #1 on Billboard being locked up. So the label would hashtag Free Snoop on a $1 million bond and hire Johnny Cochran to represent him for the next 2 years. Snoop Dogg's case fueled a general debate over whether gangster rap contributed to or merely reflected gunplay, drug abuse, sexual violence, street gang warfare, and other social ills. While the media portrayed the East Coast versus West Coast rap scene as dangerous and violent, many of the problems being headlined were only being amplified by outlets focusing on highlighting gang-related violence and providing constant coverage of the rap scene. However, there was a time that West Coast artists Tupac and Snoop could be seen hanging out with rising East Coast sensations Biggie and Bad Boy Records CEO-owner Sean Diddy Combs, and even sharing stages together. Things took a dramatic turn on November 30th, 1994, when Tupac was shot 5 times and robbed in the lobby of Quad Recording Studios in Manhattan, New York. Believing that former friend and associate Biggie and Diddy were behind his shooting, he publicly ended their friendship. Not even a day after being shot, Tupac would stand trial for his sexual assault charge, and unable to pay a $3 million bail, he would begin his 1.5-year-long sentence, and Biggie while he was locked up, would release Who Shot Ya, a B-side track from his Big Papa. Now, while Diddy and Biggie denied having anything to do with the shooting on November 30th and claimed that Who Shot Ya was recorded before the shooting, Tupac and those around him interpreted it as Big's way of taunting him and began to stew while behind bars. As he served his time, the 1995 Source Awards would hold their second annual ceremony at Madison Square Garden in August, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic nights in hip-hop. Nominated for several awards, Death Row Records was not received warmly by the tense crowd. Announced as the winner for Soundtrack of the Year on the motion picture Above the Rim, Suge Knight would accept the award and deliver his iconic acceptance speech. If you don't want your executive producer in all your records, in your videos, dancing, come to Death Row. That seemed to spice some things up in the crowd, okay? The Death Row drama of the night was just getting started. Dr. Dre was announced as Producer of the Year and was met with a lackluster reception, complimented with boos and jeers. Not able to hold his anger back, Snoop Dogg would leave his seat and join his mentor on stage and address the crowd. The East Coast don't like Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg? The East Coast don't got love for Death Row? Met with more boos and aggression, it seemed the crowd at Madison Square Garden was committed to supporting New York and New York only. East Coast and West Coast tensions would get even more dangerous once the Dog Pound released Dog Food, a collective album with the polarizing hit New York, New York, featuring Snoop Dogg and Corrupt in October of 1995. Allegedly written as an homage to New York by Snoop and Corrupt, the track would be seen as another dig at the East Coast top dogs. Meanwhile, 8 months into his sentence, it was time to free Pac. Tupac would officially sign with Death Row Records under the infamous Death Row Records napkin contract, releasing the rapper from his sentence early with a $3.5 million ticket and guaranteeing the label 3 albums. On October 4th, 1995, Tupac signed the formal contract with Death Row backed by Interscope Records, and 8 days later was out of prison and ready for war. He would begin attacking his ops in diss tracks, media appearances, and on the track whenever he could. The Dog Pound would return to the Big Apple, however, in April of 1996 to film the music video for New York, New York. Rumored that Biggie called into a radio station using a fake name and aired the location of their music video out, the trailer would be targeted and shot up by unknown assailants. Originally planning on attending the shoot, Tupac did not go, but once he received the news, he was furious. According to Napoleon, a close associate of Tupac, this only unified Death Row behind Tupac and fueled his conspiracies against Biggie and Bad Boy Records. When Snoop returned home, he claimed he actually hopped on the diss track and aimed it at Biggie. This is all allegedly, according to Napoleon. Biggie and Lil Cease, however, denied their involvement, and Snoop decided to forgive the actions and wanted to move on. Mind you, Snoop was still dealing with that pesky murder case for the past 2 years and felt the beef was growing more and more violent and was becoming less interested in living up to the gangster persona that Death Row Records was crafting. Tupac, on the other hand, was bothered by Snoop's ability to let the issue go. Considering the label's stance on Bad Boy Records and his own code that my enemies are your enemies, Snoop, continuing to have feelings of camaraderie and interest in doing any business with Bad Boy Records and Biggie, created the crack in the pair's friendship. When Tupac released Hit 'Em Up featuring the Outlaws in June of 1996, he directly addressed Biggie and claimed to have slept with his girl. Pac was on one, and Snoop did not agree, feeling like Tupac was asking for more problems. Officially cleared of his murder charge, Snoop would return to New York with Death Row Records again for the 1996 MTV Music Video Awards with a fresh blowout and a fresh attitude concerning his career and lifestyle. Behind the scenes, Death Row Records and Tupac were ready to take on anybody that stood against them in New York, inviting a slew of local gang members and muscle to come party and be ready to get busy due to the commotion they had caused with rising star Nas and Mobb Deep over the song Hit 'Em Up. During the show, Tupac and Nas would share a tense encounter backstage when crossing paths for award presentation, and California Love was snubbed for Song of the Year, giving Pac some things to say for the cameras after. During an interview with MTV, Snoop would join Tupac and were asked directly about a future collaboration between Death Row Records and Bad Boy. Tupac cleared the air and said it wasn't happening, and it appeared that Snoop was co-signing. After the award ceremony, with entourages in tow, both Tupac and Nas would cross paths again at an after party, but this time, Nas had his squad and the muscle and firepower to step to the Machiavelli artist and anyone else affiliated. First approaching Snoop, Nas's crew would ask if he wanted this problem. Realizing that he was outmanned and outgunned, Snoop felt that the beef went too far and real consequences were going to happen. In that moment, Snoop chose to stand down and wave the white flag. When they reached Tupac, the California Love artist was ready to go toe-to-toe and let Nas know how far he was willing to take this beef. After the incident at the party, Snoop would do an exclusive interview with Angie Martinez and reveal the side he was truly on in the East Coast versus West Coast beef. When asked about working with Bad Boy Records, Snoop revealed that he actually got along with the label CEO and Premier Star and wanted to actually make music with them. Once back at the hotel, it didn't take long for word to get out. Snoop would notice immediately his friend's demeanor changing towards him. Weird encounters, strange phone calls, and behavior left Snoop feeling uneasy towards Tupac. When it was time to board the private jet back to the West Coast, Snoop would receive a tense and cold reception from Shakur, who would barely speak to him, and receive an even colder reception from Suge Knight. Off the plane, Snoop would once again try to connect with his friend about the upcoming fight in Las Vegas, and although both had plans to go, the cold reception was not giving boys trip. Tupac continued to ice out Snoop, and the two would not speak again. Snoop would decide to stay back home in LA for this fight, but Tupac went along to Vegas without addressing the elephant in the room. On September 7th, 1996, Tupac would be shot by an unknown assailant in Las Vegas after a boxing match at the MGM Grand. He would fall into a coma and pass away 6 days later at the age of 25. Those affiliated with the Outlaws and Death Row Records would continue to hold Bad Boy Records and the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry responsible for Tupac's death, and considered Diddy and Snoop's relationship problematic and grow even more aggressive towards Snoop. 1 year after the tragedy, Death Row Records is imploding. Dr. Dre has walked away from the label after another fallout. Suge would be arrested for a probation violation, and the low performance of his sophomore album, The Dogfather, Snoop was starting to see the end. In 1997, the Ain't Nothing But a G-Thang artist released a statement to Billboard announcing his departure from Death Row. "I definitely feel like my life is in danger. If I stay with Death Row, that's a part of the reason why I'm leaving. Dre is gone, Suge is in jail, Pac is now dead. It's telling me I'm either going to be dead or in jail, or I'm going to be nothing." Once a free agent, Snoop was quickly sought after by Master P at No Limit Records and invited to work for the label in 1998. After months of songwriting and business development, it was time to let the dog out. He would release The Game Is To Be Sold, Not To Be Told in 1998, No Limit Talk Dog in 1999, and The Last Meal in 2000, earning 2 million copies sold and the lifestyle to match his success. In 2024, we still don't have the answer to the "who shot you" question, but new details have come out surrounding the death of Tupac, allegedly connecting Diddy's involvement with suspicions that he put a $1 million hit on Tupac's head and used Dwayne "Keefy D" Davis to carry out the ordeal. Keefy D has released his own testimony via the Murder Rap documentary in 2008 and in 2018, claiming to be the one responsible for organizing his death with Diddy's involvement, and sang like a bird when he didn't get that check. It wasn't until 2023 that Keefy D would be put on trial and sentenced to accomplice for murder and conspiracy to murder charges and put behind bars. With all the allegations surrounding Diddy, Snoop has come under fire from former Death Row CEO Suge Knight for being a part of these sex parties and being a part of a secret society. Snoop denied these allegations by posting some laughing emojis and offering the CEO thoughts and prayers. But it seems the rapper has slightly distanced himself from Diddy as well. In his interview on Drink Champs, Snoop doubled down on his choice to not take Tupac's stance in the rivalry. "They tried to get me to not like Puffy and Biggie while we was in the middle of Death Row and the Bad Boy feud. I made a choice, I had no issues with them." That was the Angie Martinez interview back in the day that created havoc between me and Death Row because I stood on my values, he emphasizes. "Mother don't understand that I had just beat a murder case. Now you want me to get in another one while I'm in New York with no guns?" Yeah, they might have been tripping, Snoop. Snoop wasn't able to mend fences with Tupac in 1996, but in 2024, he claims to have built a strong relationship with the Tupac estate and will celebrate the 30th anniversary of Death Row Records as a proud owner and holds a net worth of over $150 million. Even though to the streets, Snoop Dogg broke the code of loyalty, but in business, he actually cracked the code to sustaining lifelong success by turning his back on his friend when he didn't agree with his values. If you want to know how it happened in hip hop, make sure you rock with me. For Hype Plus News, I'm Millie Rock on Any Block.